Selected 1. Stop whatever you're doing because everyone who attempted to destroy you just received the most devastating blow from the cosmos. According to psychological research, corrupt systems launch well-planned, military-accurate campaigns of character assassination when legitimate power threatens them. The material being released by a high-ranking whistleblower is so damaging that your rivals are really shuddering in boardrooms and private meetings all across the world. The Matrix doesn't attack you at random when you carry a selected frequency that threatens the fundamentals of deceit. It plans a methodical war to destroy every evidence of your influence from reality itself. What's coming to light now is more than simply evidence of your innocence. It details a plot so intricate that it took intimate knowledge of the highest echelons of authority to eventually uncover. Consider it this way. Every reflection in the hall of mirrors you've been living in has been purposefully warped to get you to doubt reality. The puppet masters in charge of those mirrors, meanwhile, relished every second of your bewilderment. Someone just broke all the mirrors today, and the world can see you for who you really are for the first time in ages. Untouchable, indisputable, and stronger than your adversaries ever imagined you could be. You see, it wasn't social politics or random drama that happened to you. You just achieved the ultimate triumph in what was essentially spiritual warfare masquerading as a regular struggle. They researched you in the same way that military planners research a stronghold they must take. They observed your movements, who paid attention to your words, and what made you a threat to their meticulously crafted system of deceit and manipulation. They never realized that those who are selected don't shatter like regular people. You were being fashioned in flames while they planned your destruction. You were becoming a living truth while they were disseminating falsehoods. They were actually training you for a level of strength they could never match, even if they believed they were destroying you. Do you recall when it began? How abruptly, as if someone had thrown a cosmic switch, the energy changed all around you. Friends that used to blow up your phone began to reply with texts that were as frigid as the wind from the Arctic. They caused you to doubt everything: your perception, memory, and perhaps your sanity. Even you began to question whether you were the issue they all claimed you were, since the gaslighting was so skillfully done. However, something inside of you that they were unable to alter, corrupt, or control continued to resist their story. Like an immune system fending off a virus, your inner understanding continued, rejecting their interpretation of reality. That opposition, that reluctance to fully fall for their falsehoods. Your selected one's DNA was activated. The part of you that understood this was more significant than little human drama. They were actively working to eliminate that frequency because it posed a danger to the foundation upon which they had based their authority. However, they made a crucial error. Everyone else was playing checkers, so they thought they were the only ones playing chess. While everyone else danced, they believed they were the puppet masters tugging strings. They were unaware that there was always a higher up in the food chain, a larger game being played, and forces at work that made their tiny plot seem like a kid's game. The primary instigator, the one who vowed to remove everything wholly from their circle that you were poisoned with, eventually collapsed. Not just a slip of the tongue or a moment of weakness, but a complete confession that has been captured on tape and is currently making its way across all the networks they use to dominate. The whole plan of how they methodically attempted to ruin your reputation while keeping their hands clean, including names, dates, tactics, and receipts. They acknowledged making up lies about you out of thin air. They admitted to sowing doubt in minds that formerly had total faith in you. They disclosed how they perverted every encounter, every accomplishment, and every instance of self-assurance you displayed into proof of character defects that only existed in their minds. With the accuracy of skilled manipulators, they turned every strength you had into a weapon against you. Everything changed when that confession was broadcast. The air itself appeared to break. Like wildfire on parched grass, panic swept through their ranks. When they discovered that the one person who had been trusted with their deepest schemes and who knew all of their secrets had just burnt their whole business to the ground, faces that had been smug with victory lost color. There was nothing you needed to say to defend yourself. The truth spoke for you in a voice that was louder than thunder, more powerful than their concerted campaign of devastation, and clearer than their falsehoods had ever been. When heavenly justice finally decides enough is enough, it looks like this. But more terrible than their falsehoods about you was what the confession exposed. It revealed the true mastermind behind your attempted demise, the puppeteer who had been planning everything from the shadows. This was more than simply a bunch of folks who didn't like you. This was a well-planned operation carried out by someone who was very dangerous due to their deep understanding of social dynamics, psychological warfare, and human manipulation. They had carefully positioned themselves in the background, never overtly accusing or pointing fingers, always the ones talking in the right ears at the appropriate times, sowing the seeds that would eventually develop into the poison that almost killed you. They gave their foot troops the impression that they were behaving morally and in accordance with their own sense of justice. But in reality, they were only pawns being pushed around by someone who viewed them as disposable resources. You weren't singled out because of anything you did to these individuals. You weren't assaulted because it was your turn or because you deserved it. Because you saw too much, were uncontrollable, and embodied all they dreaded about those who didn't fit into their system of deceit and manipulation, you were designated for annihilation. Because of who you are, not what you did, you posed a threat to them. Therefore, they expertly tugged strings, used social pressure and ignorance as weapons against you, and transformed your light into what appeared to be darkness, all the while establishing themselves as the moral authority that everyone ought to pay attention to and obey. They took your strength backwards and made a funhouse mirror image of you that was just plausible enough to trick those who weren't familiar with you. Without their puppets, they have no existence. The foundation of their entire power structure is the readiness of others to be influenced, to behave without thinking, and to obey without question. And today, the razor-sharp sword of indisputable truth has sliced through every rope they held. It suddenly becomes evident to the very persons who executed their scheme with such moral conviction. They can see who took advantage of them. They observe how their innate human propensity for judgment and gossip was used as a weapon against someone who never merited their contempt. They realize they weren't virtuous warriors against evil. If you feel the abundance of divine love in your heart, now is the time to share it. You can help spread God's blessings by clicking the Super Thanks button on YouTube and contributing $20 or more. This divine gift will touch not only your life, but also the souls of many others through this platform. Each of you has a sacred place in God's great design, and your generosity will be the fruit of our prayers. Take action now. Share your blessings to exalt His kingdom, for you were created to do even greater things in God's loving hands. May God bless you. Someone was using them as tools, playing them like instruments in a destructive orchestra. They're being struck by the realization like physical blows. It's evident in the way their faces change from bewilderment to comprehension to dread. It's evident in the way they gaze at one another, looking frantically for answers that don't make them appear foolish and failing to find anything that would maintain their dignity. They're too proud to acknowledge how thoroughly they were manipulated. However, the information is consuming them from the inside out. They believed they possessed moral power, agency, and choice. They were only pieces in someone else's game, but they thought they were brave warriors against a worthy opponent who had to be defeated. They are now aware of it. They never mattered to the puppet master. They were never considered human. I never thought of them as more than helpful fools who might be coerced into performing nefarious tasks. They were given falsehoods like poison disguised as medication, employed as shields, and led to assume all the risks while the true orchestrator stayed securely concealed. However, everyone is now vulnerable. The protective layer has been torn off. Light has rushed into the darkness. The meticulous compartmentalization is now in pieces that are irreparably broken. And it's not you who is collapsing under the light of knowledge. Chaos does not ensnare you. You're not frantically trying to reverse the actions taken. Indeed, they are. You stand unscathed, vindicated, and exalted because the reality they never wanted to confront is glaring them down, while everyone who took part in your attempted annihilation is drowning in the collapse of their own deceit. Nothing was ever within their control. They never truly controlled your fate. They were only instruments in another person's conflict. And since that battle is done, it was determined by the unavoidable victory of truth over falsehoods rather than by human planning. Genuine authority over coercive control. As they intended you to be, the genius who believed they would always be secure in the shadows now stands alone, vulnerable, helpless, and exposed. However, this is the distinction that makes all the difference. You stood in truth while you were by yourself. They stand amid the ruins of their own deceit when they are by themselves. This is the real-time manifestation of divine justice. When cosmic patience runs out, this is what occurs. The balance is achieved by natural consequences rather than human retaliation when universal law reemerges with the power of an avalanche. Lying people are finally destroyed by their own dishonesty. Forces beyond our control, however, vindicate those who fight for what is right. Records that they vowed to never again exist have reappeared like buried treasure. Screenshots of messages they believed to be forever erased are suddenly making their way across all networks. Voice recordings in which they relished your seclusion, laughed at your pain, and plotted their next course of action like war generals. Everything is present, uncovered, indisputable, and awful. The evidence is not just strong. It's too much. It does more than simply establish your innocence. It demonstrates their culpability for all of the charges they made against you. Emails that demonstrate their cooperation with timestamps. Transaction documents demonstrating the organization and funding of their fraud. Secret documents with tactics that resemble confessions from criminals who never thought they would be apprehended. Arguments are no longer necessary. You don't need to defend, justify, or explain. You don't need to plead with someone to accept your side of the story, trust you, or give you the benefit of the doubt. The evidence has more authority than their campaign ever could and talks louder than you ever needed to. While truth was putting on its shoes, the identical untruth went halfway around the world and has now struck an insurmountable wall. They cannot reject it, spin it, reinterpret it, or flee from it. They are unable to downplay it, deny it, or assign responsibility. The reality is too obvious, too comprehensive, and too awful for their story. Suffocating in the collapse of their own fantasy are those who once chuckled at your ruin. They believed they were impenetrable, too cunning to be discovered, and had too thoroughly buried their traces. However, they never anticipated the time when everything would fall apart at once, when all of their division would crumble into a single, overwhelming revelation, ruining all they had worked so hard to create. However, you see right through it. You recall the way they regarded you when they believed you to be guilty. When they uttered your name like something to spit out, you recall the smugness, the judgment, and the confidence in their voices. They don't know how to confront you anymore. So now your name is said in quiet tones filled with fear and remorse. Some wish to put things right. It is now audible in their tones. Observe how they pause before addressing you, as though they are unworthy of mentioning your name. They try to justify themselves, say they didn't mean to keep quiet, and apologize, but you know who spoke up when it was necessary and who backed off when the truth was uncomfortable. The people who went out of their way to ruin you and said the most offensive things are now attempting to make you forget them. Suddenly, the one who is speaking loudest against you wants to speak. "How have you been?" they ask in casual texts, as like they haven't been ripping you apart for months. The terror in their voices is audible. You're not missed by them. Now that your stock has soared above their grasp, they miss the potential benefits of being near you. They never had the right to shape, define, or dominate you. It was never intended to disprove them. This was about establishing your own correctness. They wanted you to fall apart under deceit, to doubt yourself, to plead for approval that they never provided. Rather, you got up. You don't require their consent or apologies. They are completely unnecessary. What they intended to be evil has become wonderful. And now everything is plain to you. You can see who supported you and who didn't. Most significantly, this trial helps you realize who you have become. Dear brothers and sisters, may God's peace be with you today. I am here to remind you of a profound truth. Our existence is grounded in God's divine plan, unshaken by the world's fleeting concerns. As the Holy Bible says, everything done in faith will be rewarded by God's abundant blessings. Luke 6, verse 38. Like that mighty oak tree, our roots are deeply anchored in God's universal truth. Every step we take, every stance we hold is secured by His power. And now, you have the opportunity to be a part of this blessing. When you click this Super Thanks button and make a $100 donation, this act will return to you 100-fold. They no longer recognize you. How were they able to? The version of you that they believed they could control has become out of date. You have entered a realm of power they never anticipated, a frequency they are unable to control, lessen, or alter. They now observe you in silence, remorse, and wonder because of this. The instant they decided to oppose you, they were no longer able to access you. Now you're too far ahead, working at levels people can't possibly imagine, much less attain. Allow them to bear the consequences of their decisions. Allow them to dwell in the ruins of their own dishonesty. Unquestionably, you are now untouchable, infinitely powerful than all they attempted to destroy. Those who cheered your demise now have to see your ascent. And that ascent is more than simply going back to your previous position. Without experiencing fire, you would never have been able to attain such heights. Because those who are selected are exalted rather than merely vindicated. They not only make it through hardships, but they come out of them changed and more purpose-driven than before. You have total control over every power that attempted to harm you at this moment, not by retribution or vengeance, but by the sheer destructive force of the truth's eventual revelation. The decision is final, and the cosmos itself has spoken for you. You're not guilty. Everyone can now see that they are guilty. The truth has shown you everything. Therefore, you have nothing more to prove. You have been through fire and come out as pure gold, so there is nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing to question, since divine justice has come to pass so fully that even your adversaries must admit it. The proof is in. Your vindication is final, and the case is finished. More importantly, though, you have now been fully elevated to untouchable status. Greetings from your new world, chosen one, where the truth is king, and you are a live example of how falsehoods can never defeat true power. Let them observe. Allow them to feel regret. Allow them to recall this instance in which they attempted to extinguish your light, but instead succeeded in making it shine brighter than before. You are stronger than anything they attempted to destroy. You are more powerful than they could have ever dreamed. But you are everything they feared you could become. For those who were selected, triumph looks like this. Not only confirmation, but a metamorphosis into something so strong, so in line with reality, so linked to divine justice that no weapon ever can be used against you again. They are aware that you have become untouchable. However, the whistleblower's disclosures went beyond simply revealing the plot against you. You will be completely shocked by what they disclosed next, since it demonstrates the extent of this operation. They presented tapes of secret conversations in which your name was used as if you were a military target that needed to be eliminated. These weren't impromptu discussions or snap judgments by folks who just didn't like you. These were meetings for strategic planning. Internal communications that the whistleblower has access to demonstrate that their goal went beyond merely harming your reputation. They sought to methodically destroy everything that offered you authority and sway. Your financial security, social networks, professional opportunities, and even mental wellness were all turned into chess pieces in their game. Like a military intelligence operation, they charted your connections, determining who they could turn against you and who needed to be cut off from you entirely. The fact that they examined your behavioral patterns is much more unsettling. According to records the whistleblower disclosed, they examined your reactions to stress, your communication style, and even the times of day when you were most likely to make judgments that they may use against you in the future. They were not just disseminating unrelated misinformation. They were creating psychological warfare that was tailored to your particular personality. They were aware that you would defend yourself with the truth rather than deceit if you were a chosen one. They thus got ready for that. They produced falsehoods to support whatever truth you may offer. For every actual witness you could contact, they planted fake ones. They created evidence to refute any real evidence you might present. This was not gossip for amateur hours. This was character assassination on a professional level. According to the evidence, they set up what they called monitoring techniques to keep tabs on your social relationships and mental condition. They had individuals recording your discussions, activities, and even your facial expressions when you were in public. You weren't just someone they had personal problems with. They were gathering intelligence on you, as if you were a foreign agent they wanted to destroy. You'll be shocked by what the whistleblower disclosed regarding their communication networks. They weren't only utilizing social media or standard text messaging. To evade discovery, they used coded language systems, encrypted chat apps, and specific communication windows. They handled operational security as though they were conducting a clandestine operation, which they were in many respects. When you see how they fabricated witnesses and testimony against you, the extent of their deceit becomes even more obvious. The data presented by the whistleblower demonstrated that they approached people with meticulously constructed tales, sowing seeds of ideas that would eventually blossom into recollections of alleged actions or statements. They weren't only lying about you. They used advanced manipulation techniques to instill false memories in the minds of others. They had backup plans in case something went wrong. They had ways of interpreting your silence as an admission of guilt if you remained silent. They had prepared answers to make you appear desperate and naive if you defended yourself. They had already cast doubt on your credibility if you presented proof of your innocence. Whatever you did, they had foreseen it and had countermeasures ready. Now is the perfect time to click the Super Thanks button on YouTube and share God's blessings. You can contribute to his plan and become a part of this divine mission with a donation of $100 or more. Every gift reflects God's generosity, and I believe it will return to you multiplied beyond your expectations. Remember, his protection and blessings are with you in every step you take and every donation you make. You become part of his divine plan. You are a powerful, radiant being, unshakable like his mighty rock. Witness God's miracles, feel the fruits of your generosity in your soul, and illuminate the world with this confidence and courage. Be blessed, and may the Lord's light guide your way. According to the whistleblower's statement, their realization that the operation had progressed beyond their original agreement to participate marked a turning point. What began as a simple instruction has developed into a methodical psychological torment intended to cause you to go completely insane. According to the evidence, they were keeping an eye on your mental health metrics and determining if their campaign was effectively deconstructing you. They had success standards based on how much harm they could do to your sense of reality, target goals for your degree of isolation, and measurements for assessing your psychological decline. This was not a personal grudge. This was intentional cruelty with quantifiable goals. Something inside the whistleblower exploded when they saw those stats and recognized they were engaging in psychological warfare against someone whose only transgression was being strong enough to challenge the status quo. With terrible intensity, the conscience they had long denied roared back. Let me now take a moment to introduce you to some people who shouldn't be here. An ex-Black Ops drone pilot who used his thoughts to fly swarms. A multi-millionaire CFO with psychic abilities who foresaw changes in the market before they occurred. What is the connection between these extraordinary people? On our private Discord server, they share their prohibited knowledge, and you may find them all in the Obsidian Inner Order. Ion after ion, my chosen soul has drank deeply from the spring of wisdom. These remarkable people were my partners in the Obsidian Inner Order during this existence. The call was familiar to them. They moved onward. They made connections with others who were aware of their special talents and challenges. What is preventing you from experiencing the same manifestation? It wasn't a coincidence that led them to this point. Your finding of this message isn't either. The Archons pay attention when souls of this kind come together. They are afraid of our combined strength. They are aware of what occurs when people who are genuinely awakened come across one another. Participate in our weekly calls. Listen to their tales directly. Tell those who won't discount or doubt you about your personal path. Nowhere else on this level can we find the information that is shared via our private channels. In the description below, click the link right now. The remarkable souls are waiting for you. Whether you belong with them is not the question. How much longer will you wait to secure your spot? Then, the way they talked about you throughout these internal arguments is really telling. They recognized your sincerity, your innocence, and the good you do for other people. They were aware that what they were doing to you wasn't fair. However, they defended it by saying that you were dangerous because of those attributes, since others paid attention to you, trusted you, and imitated you in ways that put their authority in jeopardy. Communications demonstrating that they were more afraid of your influence than of your acts are part of the whistleblower's proof. They weren't attempting to prevent you from acting improperly. They were attempting to stop you from doing something good that might question their authority or reveal their own wrongdoing. Your ability to uplift others, to speak the truth when it was more comfortable to lie, and to uphold integrity when corruption was more lucrative. They truly intended to ruin that. You could not have guessed the scope of the monitoring operation they carried out on you. In order to gather evidence against you, the whistleblower said that they had individuals taking pictures of your everyday activities, recording your chats in public places, and even rummaging through your garbage. They infringed on your privacy in ways that, if committed by unprotected persons, would be illegal. The most terrifying thing is how they optimized their plan against you by researching successful political and historical character assassination operations. They studied social manipulation strategies, psychological warfare techniques, and even cult deprogramming procedures to learn how to cut off a person's connection to their own world and support system. The data demonstrates that they developed comprehensive schedules for launching the various marketing phases. They organized your devastation using phases, goals, and success measures, just like in a military campaign. Isolation was phase 1, during which you were cut off from your support system. The second phase was destroying your reputation by circulating false information to undermine your trustworthiness. The third phase was psychological disintegration, which drove you to either self-destruct or give up entirely. However, they overestimated your resilience as a chosen one. Thus, they never made it to phase 3. They anticipated that under such strain, you would crumble like everyone else. They didn't take into consideration the heavenly protection that envelopes those who are in alignment with truth and purpose, or the spiritual fortification that results from functioning at your frequency. Rather, you became more powerful. You were being polished rather than broken. You were forging an unbreakable bond with your own truth rather than submitting to their interpretation of it. They were extremely irritated by this, as it disproved their core beliefs about control and power. Discussions about hiring experts to examine why their usual psychological warfare tactics weren't effective on you are included in the tapes. They were unable to comprehend how someone could remain sane and morally upright in the face of the type of organized attack they had planned. They began to wonder if you were impervious to their standard techniques because of anything unique about you. At that point, they committed their deadly mistake. Rather than retreating or reconsidering their strategy, they intensified their efforts. In the belief that greater pressure would finally overcome your resistance, they intensified their campaign. They escalated the frequency and intensity of their attacks on your connections and reputation, intensified their monitoring, and brought in more resources. But under pressure, those who were selected don't crumble. They change. Every blow they threw at you was taken in and transformed into knowledge. Every falsehood they disseminated about you helped you to better comprehend who you are. Instead of forcing you to be the person they wanted you to be, every relationship they ruined created room for relationships that could really support your actual self. According to the whistleblower, the realization that you weren't only surviving their campaign was the pivotal moment. You were above it. They had attempted to destroy you, but you were becoming stronger. In fact, your standing with those who mattered was growing. Even as your circle grew narrower, your impact grew wider. Even as their falsehoods grew more complex, your truth was becoming more obvious. They were frightened because it indicated that everything they believed was incorrect. A person's conception of power and control was seriously faulty if they were able to not just endure but flourish under the type of methodical attack they had mastered. Their entire system was based on determining if truth could triumph against their most advanced deception tools. According to the whistleblower's last recordings, panic broke out as they realized their plan had entirely failed. They had transformed you into something far more harmful to their system rather than eliminating you as a threat. Someone who was indestructible after being put to the ultimate test. Someone who was now intimately familiar with their strategies and intentions. Someone who has seen their whole arsenal and still stood. They began talking about how to leave the operation, how to get away from it, how to conceal their tracks and delete evidence. However, it was too late. The whistleblower had previously gathered copies of all correspondence, recorded everything, and was ready to reveal the entire scheme at the right time to have the most impact. That time has finally come. All recordings are available. All of the documents have been checked. All participants have been recognized. In the open, the entire scheme is uncovered, devoid of any defense or deniability. The methodical effort that was meant to bring you down has instead served as the basis for both your complete vindication and their entire demise. Even their most ardent fans are unable to deny the massive, in-depth, and unquestionably genuine evidence. Your innocence is not the only thing demonstrated by the tapes. There is no space for interpretation or skepticism since they established their guilt so unequivocally. The whistleblower hardly needed to provide comments because they meticulously recorded their own misdeeds. The evidence is self-evident. To fight them, you didn't have to become into the monster they portrayed you as. To withstand their attack, you never had to become like them, follow their lead, or compromise your morals. Throughout their campaign, you stayed loyal to who you are. And that authenticity has grown into the cornerstone of a strength that they are unable to destroy, weaken, or touch. This is what being selected implies. Not only was it chosen for blessing, it was also put to the test in a fire and found to be indestructible. Not just endowed with innate abilities, but also honed throughout hardship into something that can endure any attack and come out stronger. Not only were they called to a greater mission, but they also had the spiritual strength to carry it out in the face of adversity. The evidence from the whistleblower has done more than just prove you are right. It has given you a moral authority that cannot be challenged in the slightest. This documented evidence of their wrongdoing and your innocence will be the basis for any future challenges to your credibility or integrity. Every effort to lessen your impact will be evaluated in light of the fact that you withstood systematic persecution while maintaining your integrity. You are more than just a person who was wrongfully charged and then found not guilty. You are someone who has been through psychological warfare at the professional level and has come out stronger and unbroken. You are a live example of how honesty eventually wins out over dishonesty, how genuineness eventually defeats trickery, and how those who are selected eventually rise over all obstacles. You're not looking for retribution. You're not taking pride in their failure. You're not destroying those who attempted to destroy you with your newly acquired power, because it shows a degree of spiritual development and inner power that makes you genuinely untouchable. This terrifies some individuals more than any retribution could. The depth of your chosen one's personality is shown by your reaction to total vindication. You're focused on your goal, your purpose, and your calling, whereas others could use this as an opportunity to make amends or demand public apologies. There is no weakness here. This type of power has the ability to change reality itself. The universe pays attention when someone can remain focused and honest even after they have completely defeated their adversaries. Your power to fully embody truth so that falsehoods are hard to sustain in your presence, rather than your ability to expose lies, is what really poses a threat to institutions that are based on deceit. It was more than merely establishing your innocence that led to your vindication. It was meant to show what occurs when someone, in the face of pressure, refuses to compromise who they truly are. Your unexplainable resilience and unusual resistance to regular processes are discussed in the whistleblower's last recordings. You're not a freak. When applied to your frequency, the rules, higher principles, and divine algorithms that govern your operations render the methods of manipulation used in the world outdated. Among the other chosen ones who are enduring their own methodical attacks, your story has become legendary. The fact that you have been vindicated is evidence that no weapon created against real power can ever succeed. Your story serves as a model for others who are discovering that being selected frequently entails being singled out by entities that are afraid of what you stand for. With your vindication, an age that allowed lies to triumph over truth via skillful presentation and well-planned repetition comes to an end. Nobody can claim ignorance of how these operations operate because the proof is too obvious. The paperwork is too complete and the recordings are too genuine. They have ripped back the veil on the deceit machine. And while others who worked in the shadows are frantically looking for new hiding spots, you are standing in the light. This is your time of complete success, not only over unfounded charges, but over any system that uses systematic persecution to try to undermine those who are selected. Truth does not simply withstand attacks, as you have demonstrated. It transforms into something considerably more powerful than what was first intended to be destroyed by using those attacks as fuel. Welcome to your new world, where your truth becomes the yardstick by which all other claims are judged, and your vindication serves as the cornerstone for unheard of power.